I was still trembling when the doorbell rang the second time. Not a polite press, an angry, deliberate buzz that seemed to stretch the air itself. My hand hovered over the peephole, heart hammering so hard I could hear blood in my ears. Through the wood, I heard the scrape of boots on brick, the whisper of radios, and a voice trying to sound official. Police. Open up! 2 words I'd never wanted to hear. The voice had weight, but it didn't have rhythm. It was too rehearsed, too stiff, like a bad actor trying to sound like authority. My stomach sank even before I pulled the chain lock and cracked the door. 2 men stood there in dark uniforms. The taller one, 6 feet at least, had a clean-shaven jaw and eyes that slid past me, never quite meeting mine. His partner was shorter, his smile nervous, his grip tight on the handcuffs at his belt. Both had badges that gleamed so brightly under the porch light, they looked like they'd been polished 5 minutes earlier. "Joshua Roberts?" the tall one asked. "Yes? You're under arrest." "Step outside." "Hands where we can see them." I froze. "Arrested? For what?" My brain scrambled through every possible explanation. Unpaid taxes, mistaken identity, some neighbor complaint blown out of proportion. Nothing made sense. The taller one, whose tag read Tony, held out a folder. "Warrant," he said, his voice flat. The folder trembled in his grip. I looked down and felt the bottom of my world shift. The words HOA Violations were stamped across the top in block letters. HOA! They were trying to arrest me for HOA violations? My chest tightened. "This is insane," I stammered, backing up. Palms sweating. That's when Sandra appeared. My wife of 12 years, Sandra, who watched baking shows in pajamas every night, who wore fuzzy socks and tied her hair up with a pencil, stepped into the hallway. But the woman who looked at those 2 men wasn't the woman I knew. Her face was cold, her voice low and commanding. "Gentlemen," she said, "step back from my husband." They didn't move. The shorter one slid the cuff from his belt, stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. The metal bit into my skin. "Don't interfere, ma'am," he snapped. I expected Sandra to panic, to scream, to run for the phone. Instead, she moved. It happened so fast I barely saw it, her wrist twisting, her shoulder dropping, her whole body shifting in one smooth arc. In a single motion, the short man was yanked forward, flipped, and slammed chest first against the hallway table. His fake badge clattered across the floor. He let out a strangled yelp. Tony reached for his belt, fumbling for something that looked like a holster. But before his hand touched it, Sandra's elbow drove into his ribs with brutal precision. He crumpled against the doorframe, gasping for air. Sandra's phone was already mounted on the foyer shelf. She double-tapped the screen. A red light blinked to life. "Recording," she said coldly. "You're committing felony fraud." The shorter man scrambled to his feet and bolted out the door, sprinting down the driveway like a hunted animal. Tony groaned, clutching his ribs, too stunned to move, and I just stood there, staring at the woman I thought I'd married. The woman who had just dismantled 2 armed men like it was muscle memory. For the first time in 12 years, I realized I didn't know her at all. But the truth is, this didn't start tonight. It started months ago with a deck, $8,000 of cedar. Perfectly cut, sanded, and polished until the boards gleamed in the sun. I'd hired Michael Carter, the contractor everyone in Maple Ridge trusted, to build it. 3 weeks of work, every nail precise, every line clean. It was my surprise for Sandra on our 12th anniversary. When she came home that Friday evening, briefcase still in her hand, she stopped at the edge of the yard. Her eyes widened. She slipped her shoes off and stepped onto the deck barefoot. "Josh," she whispered, this is really something. That weekend we hosted a barbecue. Patricia Wilson from next door brought her famous potato salad. Even the Johnsons from across the street, who hadn't joined a neighborhood gathering in years, showed up. People admired the craftsmanship, the way it elevated our corner lot. But Sandra kept checking her phone. Every buzz drew her eyes away from the compliments. Her fingers danced across the screen like she was conducting an invisible orchestra. She smiled when spoken to, nodded at the right moments, but she wasn't really there. I told myself it was work. On Monday morning, the violation notice arrived, $200 per day. Unauthorized construction exceeding maximum deck height by 6 inches. 6 inches. I read it 3 times, thinking maybe fatigue had blurred the words. But no. They claimed the deck was too tall, in violation of Maple Ridge HOA code. Michael rushed over, blueprints under his arm, tape measure in hand. He measured 3 times, shaking his head. "Josh, this is exact. 36 inches, legal maximum's 38. Teresa approved the plans herself. Teresa Edwards, our HOA president. Widow, according to neighborhood gossip. Always precise, always smiling, always watching. But when I showed Sandra the letter, she barely glanced at it. Just tear it down and rebuild, she said. Her tone was casual, almost dismissive, as though we were deciding what to order for dinner. I gaped at her. Tear it down? After 3 weeks of work? After Teresa signed the plans? Her eyes didn't flinch. It's not worth it, Josh. Trust me. Trust her, the woman who'd pretended surprise at the deck I'd been planning for months. The woman who now wanted to erase it. Something was wrong. That afternoon, Mrs. Wilson leaned over the fence while I was watering the lawn. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her tape measure. 3 families, she whispered, glancing toward Teresa's immaculate house. 3 families left Maple Ridge after building additions. All corner lots. All used the same contractor. Her eyes held mine for a moment, then she patted my arm. Be careful. She didn't explain further. But her words echoed in my mind long after she shuffled back inside. That night, Sandra sat at the dining room table with papers spread across it. But these weren't Social Security forms, the kind she normally worked on. I glimpsed photographs of houses, timestamps scribbled in margins, notes about financial transfers. Long day? I asked, keeping my voice light. She jumped, then swept the papers into her briefcase with alarming speed. Just backlog, she muttered. I went to bed uneasy. At 2 a.m, I woke to silence. Sandra's side of the bed was empty. Her car keys were gone, through the blinds. I caught the glow of our BMW's taillights slipping down Maple Ridge Drive. My wife, who processed disability paperwork for a living, was sneaking out in the middle of the night. The next morning, Michael returned with a folder. His face was pale, his voice low. Josh, I need you to see this. Inside were documents from his last 3 jobs, the Rodriguez family on Oak Street, the Patels on Birch, the Kowalskis on Elm. All had received violation notices after his work. All were forced to sell within months. I thought it was coincidence, he said quietly. But 3 families in 18 months? All corner lots? Now you? My stomach clenched. A pattern. But the strangest part came that evening when Sandra came home early. She walked straight to the deck, stared at it for a long moment, then turned to me. Tear it down this weekend, she said firmly. I'll help you. Her voice was hard. Not a suggestion. A command. No, I said. We fight this. Something flickered across her face, fear. Anger? I couldn't tell. Her phone buzzed. She slipped into the garage to take the call. Through the window, I watched her pacing, gesturing, her face drawn tight with stress. When she came back inside, she was different. Do what you want about the deck, she said flatly. I have work to do. She locked herself in the home office, and I stood staring at the deck, at the shadows stretching across its cedar boards, wondering if I'd just stepped into something much bigger than wood and nails. I couldn't stop staring at the deck. Its cedar boards caught the late sun, glowing gold as if mocking me. To anyone else, it looked like perfection, a picture straight from a home magazine. But to me, it had become something else, a stage, a lure, a target. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for the faint sound of Sandra's breathing beside me, except she wasn't there. Again. The bedroom door was ajar, the sheets cool where her body should have been. I checked the garage. Her car was gone. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 2:14 a.m. I drove after her like a man chasing a ghost. Kept my headlights dimmed, stayed 3 cars back, hands slick on the wheel. She didn't take the freeway, didn't head toward the office. Instead, she drove through back roads, finally pulling into the parking lot of an abandoned office park on Route 7. I parked half a block away, heart thudding. Through binoculars, I saw her. Sandra sat in the driver's seat, calm, composed, waiting. 10 minutes later, another car pulled up. A man stepped out, gray hair, expensive suit, even at this hour. They talked through rolled-down windows, their words lost in the night air. Then a third car arrived. This time, a younger woman got out, sobbing. Sandra stepped from our BMW, hugged her, comforted her, wrote something in a leather notebook. The man nodded occasionally. The woman wiped her tears. After 20 minutes, all three drove away in different directions. Not an affair. Not what I expected. Something stranger. When Sandra slipped back into bed at 4:30 a.m., she smelled faintly of coffee and a perfume I didn't recognize. "Sleep well?" she whispered. I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, Michael arrived looking like he hadn't slept. He shoved his phone at me, his hands shaking. "Josh, I got this email last night. The address was sandra.robertson@gov.us. Official looking." Too official. The message was short. "Proceed with original deck specifications. Standard bonus applies upon violation notice." Michael asked. "Teresa Richards? Teresa Edwards? I don't know. But Josh, your wife told me to build that deck to exact measurements. Then Teresa files a violation. Clean profit?" His voice cracked. "Except you were the client." "Her own husband." I felt the blood drain from my face. "She set me up?" I whispered. Michael winced. "I swear I thought it was legitimate. Like quality control. She paid me $500 a job, but Josh, she's been doing this for months." The room tilted around me. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, was either part of a scam or playing a game too big for me to understand. That afternoon, "Teresa invited me over for coffee. Just neighbors chatting," she'd said on the phone. Her house was immaculate. Pristine furniture. Walls painted in HOA-approved beige. Not a photo in sight. Not a single trace of a grieving widow. She poured expensive coffee into delicate china cups. "My husband died in a construction accident," she began, her voice breaking right on cue. The platform gave way. "He fell 3 stories. That's why I'm so strict. Every violation I write, it's to prevent another family from suffering what I suffered." Her hand brushed mine. "The deck is beautiful, Josh. Truly, but those 6 inches? They matter." Tears welled perfectly in her eyes. I almost believed her. Almost. Then I saw her manicure, fresh with tiny diamonds embedded, and I recognized the coffee label, $70 a pound. A grieving widow on a fixed income couldn't afford luxuries like that. When I got home, I found a bank statement on my desk. Not ours. Sandra's. A private account I didn't know existed. $3,500 deposits every 2 weeks. Source: DMK Legal Services. $72,000 in 6 months. Untaxed. Hidden. My stomach turned. Beside it sat a burner phone. I scrolled through texts written in cold, coded language. Package delivered to Target 3. Surveillance confirms pattern. Subject unaware. Proceeding to Phase 2. Subject unaware. Was that me? That night Sandra came home late. She looked drained, her hair slightly undone, her face pale. "Long day?" I asked, watching her carefully. She froze, then forced a smile. "Client emergency. Don't wait up." When she went upstairs to shower, I slipped into the office and placed a button camera on the bookshelf, lens facing the living room. If she was lying, I needed proof. At midnight, the footage rolled live to my phone. Sandra came downstairs, dressed in black tactical pants, running shoes, a dark jacket. She carried a backpack filled with equipment, camera lenses, multiple phones, even a handgun. She didn't see the hidden camera. She never looked my way. "Don't wait up," she called softly, then slipped out into the night. My wife wasn't just sneaking out. She was running an operation. The following day, Michael called again. "Josh, I did some digging," he said, voice tight. "Teresa Edwards doesn't have a dead husband. There's no obituary, no accident report, nothing. She made it all up." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Then who is she?" Michael hesitated. "I don't know, but your wife does. I saw them together. Having lunch. Friendly, like old friends." I felt my knees buckle. Sandra, Teresa, Michael, all connected. The deck wasn't a mistake. It was bait, and I was the fool who built it. That evening, I confronted Sandra. She had just come home, dropping her keys in the bowl by the door. "Who are you?" I demanded, throwing the burner phone and the bank statement onto the table. Her face went pale. then flushed red. "You went through my things?" she snapped. "No denial? No explanation?" My voice shook. "You've been lying for months. Secret accounts, burner phones, fake emails. What am I supposed to think?" Her jaw tightened. "You're supposed to trust me," I laughed bitterly. "Trust you? When you're working with Teresa." "With Michael?" "When you're gaslighting me in my own house?" Sandra's eyes hardened. "You don't understand." "You can't." Then she grabbed her briefcase and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. I stood there, staring at the burner phone on the table, my heart pounding like a hammer in my chest. I had a wife I couldn't trust, a deck that was apparently evidence, and neighbors disappearing one by one under the weight of fake violations. And now, I had a question I couldn't answer. Was Sandra my enemy, or my only hope? The lens I hid in the bookshelf was barely bigger than a shirt button, but it made our living room feel like a courtroom. I watched the feed on my phone with the sound off, heart loud enough to drown everything else. Midnight, then 12:14, then 12:27. At 12:31, the upstairs hall light cut a thin trapezoid down the stairwell. Sandra's shadow crossed it first, small, compact, decisive. Then she stepped into the frame in a black jacket and quiet shoes, her hair cinched tight as if she were keeping secrets under the clip. She didn't glance around like a thief or hover like someone sneaking. She moved like people who have keys to places they shouldn't, efficient, practiced, almost bored. She laid the case on the coffee table and snapped it open. In the dim light, small things gleamed, lenses nested in foam, a laser measure that winked its red dot across the rug, a pair of thin gloves the color of ink. 3 phones with colored tape, blue, red, yellow. She took the yellow phone, tapped a code without looking, and a list of names scrolled by too fast for the lens to hold. She stopped at one, read, exhaled, and set it face down as if even the black glass could betray her. A badge came last. Not thrown, not revealed with a flourish, lifted the way you lift something that can change the temperature of a room. The metal caught a line of light from the street, and for a second I thought I could read the words. I couldn't. I only read her face. The corners of her mouth settled. Whatever she had been all day, at this hour she was this. A woman preparing to walk into the dark with proof that she belonged there. She checked the deadbolt. Checked the back door. Checked her watch. And then this was the part that made my pulse skip. Her eyes drifted past the camera, directly toward it. They paused on the spines I'd nudged out of alignment to hide the pinhole. Her gaze held for 1 beat, 2, then slid on. She zipped the case, killed the light, and left. I watched the empty room for a full minute, waiting for my breath to remember how to land. The feed reflected my face back at me when the screen dimmed. A man living in a house he knew how to repair and a life he didn't. I replayed the footage twice more, not because there was anything new to find, but because repetition made the world feel like something I could measure. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I made coffee I didn't drink, cleaned a counter already clean, then walked into the garage like a person climbing into a confessional. Her BMW still smelled like the sugar-free gum she chewed when she was trying not to argue. I opened the glove compartment, expecting insurance cards and expired mints, and found identities instead. 6 business cards in a rubber band, edges soft with use. Sarah Rollins. Insurance investigator, S.R. Thompson, property assessor. Roberts Solutions, LLC, compliance officer. 2 more variations of her name that looked legal enough to pass any lobby desk in town. The last card stopped me. It was scuffed, worn where a thumb had worried the edges, and heavier than the rest. The seal embossed on it was one I had seen only in movies and at courthouses. The words were small, but the authority wasn't. Contractor, Department of Justice. Not an agent, not the badge she'd flashed at my front door, but a key card to rooms I'd never been in. I laid all 6 on the passenger seat and tried to remember the first time I'd watched her talk a customer service rep into breaking their own rules with a smile. The skill was the same. The stakes apparently were not. The garage door moaned. Panic wasn't a choice. It was a reflex. I swept the cards up, slid them back under the insurance papers, shut the compartment, and turned toward the door with the most normal face I could find. Sandra stood there with 2 grocery bags and the kind of exhausted half-smile people wear when they've been talking other people through their own storms all morning. She set bags on the hood of the car and kissed my cheek like routine could save us. I helped her unpack. Apples thumped into the bowl. Milk hummed into the fridge. She tapped a note into her phone about picking up dry cleaning, and I watched her thumbs move like I had watched them at the barbecue. Quick, precise, busy. Were those thumbs telling Teresa to count down my inches, or were they writing names of people nobody else would? Dinner out tonight? I asked, pretending not to hear the wobble in my voice. She studied me just a second too long. "I've got a late one," she said. "Rain check?" I nodded as if rain checks were a language we still spoke. After she left, Michael called. He didn't open with hello. He didn't even bother with my name. "Do you know what you're in?" he asked, like a man who had relived the moment he realized his life was a trap. "You tell me," I said. "I think your wife is running both sides," he whispered. Paper rustled like he'd barricaded the phone under invoices. She tells me what dimension to hit so it looks perfect and still pings a clause. Then Teresa files. Families panic, sell. Sometimes Sandra shows up after, counseling them on how to fight, the fight they can't win, drags it out. More fees, more pressure. It's a pinch. Pressure both ways until the house burps out into someone else's pocket. "You're saying she's with Teresa?" I said, and the words tasted like pennies and bile. "I'm saying I saw them laughing last week over salads like it was their birthday," he said. "And I'm saying an email from your wife told me to build your deck exactly so it would trigger. And I'm saying I took $500 a job because it felt like work instead of theft, and I wanted to sleep at night. And I can't now." I stared at the neat lines of our kitchen tile and tried to map the conversation onto them. The email. The salad. The laugh. The $500 that turned a man into a tool you can store in a van. There is a version of me that would have hung up then, called Sandra, screamed until the windows shook. The version of me that answered Michael instead had learned something about silence this week. "Send me the email," I said. He did. The address wore government clothes. The wording wore Sandra's bluntness. Proceed, bonus, notice, TRTR, Teresa Richards or Edwards or any number of names people pick up when they start treating lives like properties, things to rename and flip. I stared at it long enough to feel something crack in me and force light through. At 2, my phone buzzed a different way. Unknown sender. One attachment. No subject, no body. The file name was plain enough to be invisible. Edwards cased zip. Zip files were the kind of thing Michael clicked. I didn't. I walked to the laptop, opened a guest profile, unplugged the Wi-Fi, and dragged the file into a virtual sandbox like I'd seen in videos at 2 a.m. You learn things when you can't sleep. Inside the zip were folders with names like $01 deeds, 02 transfers, 03 testimony. In the last folder, 6 videos, each labeled with a last name I knew from block parties and sorry for the noise notes on my door. I played one. A woman I'd never spoken to stared into a camera with the fixed gaze of someone trying not to cry for the 17th time. "Teresa made it impossible," she said, hands clenched. Every month there was something new. The deck didn't match a line in a book that nobody had read. The fence leaned, though it didn't. The garage was suddenly 2 inches too greedy. And then the contractor came to confirm the measurements she already had. "We sold because we wanted to sleep again. Sandra Roberts is the only one who believed me. She said there were others. She said she was building a case." I paused the video and looked at my reflection on the screen superimposed over the woman's set mouth. Another file was a spreadsheet. The columns were neat and merciless. Date, parcel, violation code, contractor confirmation, sale price versus market, LLC purchaser, flip margin. Across rows, the same little dance. Notice, confirm, squeeze, sell, profit. The numbers in the last column did not lie. They shouted. Somebody made $200,000 doing this to the Johnsons. Someone else made $150 on a house where I had eaten burnt hamburgers and laughed until I had to sit down. In the 05 media folder, screen captures from the HOA portal. Teresa's posts, gentle and reasonable in public. Backyard whispers transcribed in neat lines. "We have to keep the neighborhood standards or it all goes downhill." People agree to their own punishments when you call them standards. Another image. A PDF of my violation. Metadata window open. Author edwardsofmapleridge.org. Title Vio Deck Roberts J038. Created Monday 7:12 a.m. Modified Monday 9:02 a.m. The name field caught me. Edwards. Not Teresa. E. A sister? A secretary? Or the detail that proves a person didn't learn forgery properly. There was one more folder named 06 Notes. Inside, a single audio file. I pressed play and Sandra's voice filled the room. Not the voice that asked me to take out the trash or told me to stop leaving my shoes by the door. The voice she had used on the porch. Victim 4. Corroborates pattern of manufactured enforcement, she said, clipped, precise. Contractor incentive documented via payments from DMK Legal Services. Next, cross-check LLC's link to flips with Edwards' family or associates. Pages rustled. Note, husband of Prez allegedly deceased, no public record. Check insurance claims. Check OSHA logs. I didn't realize I had stood until my knee hit the table. The sound in the room was a mix of my own breath and the quiet hiss the speakers make when they hold space for a voice that hasn't come yet. In the last subfolder, a video named If Josh Opens This.mp4 waited like a dare. I clicked. Sandra stared into the lens from the kind of parking lot where most lights don't work. Her hair was pulled back. The dark half-moons under her eyes were honest. "If you're watching this," she said, "I'm sorry for all of it. You don't have to forgive me. But please, do not meet Michael alone. He's desperate. He thinks he can write his way out of this by writing you out of it. I'm heading to his office. If I'm right, there will be a trap. If I'm wrong, I will apologize for as long as it takes. I love you." She checked her watch, turned as if she'd heard something off screen, and the video ended like a door. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I looked anyway. "Michael, emergency. She just broke into my van. I have footage. Come alone. Now." I stood there with two choices opened in front of me like the double doors of a church. In one, I called the number Sandra had once written on a napkin during a game night. "If anything ever feels wrong, call David Walker." And waited for a man in a good suit to tell me where the exits were. In the other, I drove to a garage office where a contractor kept his records and his regrets and let him show me a film that would end in a gun. Sometimes people choose the right thing because they're brave. Sometimes they choose the wrong thing because they are tired of being afraid. I chose the door that left the kitchen behind. I pocketed the USB, locked the house, and drove. The route to Michael's shop is a straight ribbon of road, 2 gas stations, 1 diner, 3 billboards for lawyers who will fight for you unless you are the one who needs fighting. I passed them without seeing a letter. My hands did the work. Turn, signal, stop. My head ran loops of every face in those videos, of Mrs. Wilson's tremor at the fence, of Sandra measuring wood in the rain like it was the difference between a verdict and a sentence. I slowed before the driveway. Lights off, car tucked into the shadow of a closed feed store. Michael's place sat behind his house, a box built fast with windows that caught the porch light like a warning. The office above the garage had shades pulled down crooked, the way people do when they don't want anyone to see but didn't have time to be careful. The tracker in my throat thumped out a code. I climbed the external stairs and knocked on the door with a knuckle that sounded like it belonged to someone else. He answered too quickly, eyes wide enough that I could see the rims. "Thank God," he said, pulling me in with a grip that had held beams and also envelopes full of cash. "You have to see what she did. The office was too neat. No coffee rings. No nail sets left where they drop. The desk looked staged, a prop assembled by someone who had seen offices on TV. A monitor on the table already had a file open. A frame grab of a figure in a dark jacket near the back of a van that belonged to him. He hit play. The figure moved in a way that resembled my wife if you squinted and didn't think about how she actually moved. "You see?" he said, too eager. "The way liars bend forward to push their story into your head. She's out of control, Josh. She's crazy." She threatened me. "We have to—" "This is fake," I said, because sometimes truth walks into a room like it paid for a ticket. He blinked. His mouth held a smile and his eyes did not. "What?" "The resolution is wrong," I said. "I wasn't an expert. I'd been married to someone who walked through footage like a map long enough to know what it looked like when the corners didn't line up. The timestamp font is... It's wrong." He looked past me as if there were a teleprompter over my shoulder. Then he stopped pretending. "You're smarter than I thought," he said, and opened the desk drawer. The gun looked bigger than the one I imagined. He didn't point it like men in movies, arm out, loud. He held it low like it was a conversation piece. "You were supposed to be number 7, he said softly, as if that were mercy. "But you had to go digging." I wanted to say I wasn't brave enough to dig. That I had just been a man who didn't want to tear down a deck. That I missed my wife in a way that felt like forgetting my own name. But explanations don't change the way a room shrinks when a gun enters it. I raised my hands. The upstairs window looked out onto the driveway and a slice of sky that had started to bruise. Somewhere down the road, a siren tried out a note and changed its mind. Michael gestured with the gun toward a chair. I sat. He paced in a line that his feet must have worn into the floorboards over the last hour. He talked about plans as if they were weather. "I call the police," he said. "I tell them there's a domestic disturbance." "You came here angry." "You threatened me. I defended myself. Tragic. I'm as shocked as anybody." His face did something like grief and then relaxed. "Self-defense plays well in this county." I looked at the door and imagined the slow crawl of seconds between now and a knock. I thought of Sandra's video and all the things I should have done differently this week. Believed her, asked harder questions, measured her in love instead of inches. I thought of the way she had set the phone on the foyer shelf like a witness and said the word recording like a promise. If she walked through this door now, I didn't know whether I would thank her or ask why she had let it get this far. The stairs creaked outside. Not heavy, not hesitant. A pace like someone who'd decided. Michael's eyes snapped to the door. His hand rose without his permission. I held my breath like a thing I could lose. A knock. 2. A voice on the other side that tried to wear authority and sounded like a man trying on his father's suit. "Police. Open up." Michael's smile was the worst thing I'd seen all week. "Right on time," he said, and gestured at the door with the gun. "Tell them it's fine. If you don't, you won't get to tell anyone anything." I stood because standing was the only option the moment allowed. Through the peephole, 2 uniforms took up the frame. The badges were shiny in the wrong way. The stitching on one shoulder was a shade too new. And beyond them, half a step back, hair in a knot, robe thrown over street clothes, eyes that had learned too much in too little time, Sandra. She didn't look at me. She looked at the knob like it was a test. "Gentlemen," she said, and the word bent the hallway around it. "You're about to make a very bad choice." I closed my eyes for the space of a breath and opened the door. The uniforms pushed the door open before I even had the chance to say a word. Michael straightened like he'd just been handed a script, sliding the gun back into the drawer as though no one had seen it. "Subject is delusional," he announced in a tone too calm, too rehearsed. "Use force if necessary." The taller one, his badge said. Tony grabbed my wrist. "Cold fingers, fake leather, grip too eager." The shorter one, Rick, smirked like a man who'd just been promised an easy payday. And then Sandra stepped in. Her robe slipped just enough to show the black jacket underneath, the same one I'd seen in the hidden camera footage. Her hair was pulled back tight, her face set like stone. But it wasn't the clothes that froze the room, it was her voice. "Gentlemen," she said, low and sharp, "you're committing felony fraud. Step away from my husband." Tony laughed, because stupid men always laugh first. "Or what, lady?" Sandra moved. "I've seen her pick up groceries. I've seen her juggle coffee mugs and car keys. I'd never seen her body transform into a weapon." She twisted, ducked, and in a blink, Tony was on the floor gasping, his fake badge skittering across the hardwood. Rick's smirk shattered into panic. He bolted for the hallway, footsteps echoing down the stairs like gunfire. Michael lunged for his drawer, but Sandra's kick slammed it shut on his fingers with a sound that made my stomach turn. He howled, clutching his hand. "You're done," Sandra snapped. She pointed to her phone, propped on the railing, red light blinking. "All of this is recorded, including you pulling a gun on my husband." Michael's face shifted through panic, rage, calculation. He opened his mouth to spin another lie, but outside the house, the sudden scream of sirens cut through everything. Blue and red lights strobed against the window blinds. Car doors slammed. Radios crackled. This time, it wasn't actors. Real cops. 3 squad cars screeched to a stop in the driveway. Behind them, a silver sedan eased in with none of the urgency of flashing lights. The door opened and a man in a suit stepped out, calm as if arriving for a meeting. David Walker. Inside, Michael's confidence evaporated. He backed into his chair, his good hand trembling. Sandra pressed him down by the shoulder, pinning him like a butterfly to a board. The cops entered first, weapons drawn, clearing corners with precision. "Hands where we can see them." Michael didn't resist this time. He raised his good hand, the other still crushed and throbbing. David entered last, adjusting his tie, scanning the room with the sharp eyes of someone who had already seen this play out on paper. "Mr. Roberts," he said to me with a polite nod. "I'm David Walker, attorney for the families defrauded by Ms. Edwards and Mr. Carter." He turned toward Sandra, and for the first time in weeks, her face softened. "Mr. Walker," she said, almost relieved. "Took you long enough," David smiled faintly. "Traffic." 2 officers cuffed Michael, reading him his rights over his own protests. His voice cracked. "This is entrapment. She set me up." "She's not even." Sandra shoved the drawer open with her foot, revealing the weapon inside. "The officer closest bagged it immediately." "Not even what?" David asked mildly. "Not even stupid enough to let you finish?" Michael glared but said nothing more. David motioned toward Sandra. "She's been my investigator for 4 months. Everything you've seen, every late night, every note, every secret, it was part of the case. She's licensed. State recognized. One of the best." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Investigator, licensed. 4 months. I thought of the 6 business cards, the burner phones, the USB drive. It all clicked in a way I hated. Sandra didn't look at me. She was already walking the officers through her recording, pointing out timestamps, explaining how Michael had threatened me at gunpoint. Calm, professional, like this was just another job. But it wasn't just another job. It was my life. Michael was hauled out in cuffs, shouting over his shoulder, "You're all going down with me! Teresa won't let this stand!" His voice cracked into a whine as the squad car door slammed shut on him. Teresa. Even now, her shadow stretched across the room. David pulled up a chair and sat like this was his office. He opened a slim folder, placed it on Michael's desk, and turned it toward me. "Property transfer records, bank deposits, LLC filings, all in neat, damning lines. Teresa targets corner lots," David explained. "They sell for premiums. Michael creates bogus violations. Families panic, sell cheap. Teresa flips the houses for enormous profit." Sandra documented everything. "And tonight," he gestured toward the porch where Tony was still face down, moaning, "you saw how far they were willing to go. I tried to speak, but the words tangled. She let me believe she was cheating, that she was lying. For months." Sandra finally looked at me then. Her eyes weren't stone anymore. They were tired, worn, guilty. "If I told you the truth, Josh, you would have been in danger. Every secret I kept was a wall between you and them." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her. But more than anything, I wanted to believe her. David closed the folder. "Mr. Roberts, I understand the personal toll here. But professionally, your wife saved a dozen families from financial ruin. She exposed one of the most sophisticated HOA fraud schemes I've ever seen." He stood, smoothing his tie again. "We'll need your statement downtown. Both of you, tonight." Sandra gave him a nod. "We'll be there." We. The word burned. The ride to the station was a blur. Reporters had already gathered outside Michael's place, their cameras flashing against the squad car windows. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, whispering, recording, texting. Maple Ridge had just discovered it was the stage for a scandal, and the world was already watching. Inside the cruiser, I sat next to Sandra in silence. Our knees almost touched. Almost. She finally spoke so softly I almost missed it. "I didn't want you to find out this way." I stared out the window. "What way did you want me to find out? After I signed the divorce papers? After they buried me next to a deck you set me up to build?" Her face crumpled, but she said nothing more. At the station, the interviews stretched for hours. Michael was processed first, screaming until his throat gave out. The fake cops were questioned separately, already contradicting each other's stories. Sandra was ushered into a private room with David and 2 detectives. I watched her through the glass as she spread papers across the table, her voice steady, her hands sure. She was in her element, a professional among professionals. But when she glanced up and caught my eyes through the window, something flickered. Regret, pain, maybe even love. Detective Barnes, the one with the sharp jaw and sharper pen, interviewed me last. He closed his notebook with a snap after I finished. "You're lucky, Mr. Roberts. 5 more minutes and we'd be chalking outlines instead of writing fraud charges." Lucky. That wasn't the word I would have used. By dawn, the story was everywhere. News vans lined Maple Ridge Drive. Headlines blared, HOA president arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Contractor and local board caught in real estate scam. Private investigator infiltrates HOA conspiracy, and Sandra's name was in every single one. When we left the station, the reporters swarmed. "Mr. Roberts, how do you feel about your wife's secret identity? Did you know she was investigating the HOA? Are you proud of her or do you feel betrayed?" Cameras shoved in my face, microphones scraped against my shirt. And behind them, Sandra walking with David, her posture tall, her eyes forward like she'd trained for this spotlight. I muttered the only 2 words I could manage. No comment. Back home, the deck sat in the morning light like an innocent bystander. The cedar planks glowed gold, perfect lines, perfect craft. The thing that had started this nightmare now looked almost holy. Sandra stood on it, arms crossed, staring down at the boards. "She didn't turn when I joined her. I manipulated everything," she said quietly. "The Yelp review that led you to Michael. The recommendation. The timing. I knew Teresa would pounce. I needed a bait case." I swallowed hard. "And that bait was me." Sandra nodded once. "I'm sorry." I wanted to tell her sorry wasn't enough. That sorry didn't erase nights of doubt, the feeling of being gaslit, the fear that the person I loved most was a stranger. But instead, I just stood there staring at the deck that had become both a trap and a salvation, because the truth was, I didn't know if I hated her for what she'd done, or loved her more for surviving it. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old battles. Every bench was filled, families clutching folders, reporters tapping notes, neighbors craning necks for a better view. Maple Ridge had never drawn this much attention. Today, it wasn't just an HOA dispute, it was a reckoning. I sat in the 3rd row, hands clenched, eyes locked on the woman I used to call my wife without hesitation. Sandra sat at the prosecutor's table, a navy suit replacing her robe, hair pulled back with military precision. She didn't glance at me. She didn't glance anywhere except forward. Michael shuffled in first, shackled orange jumpsuit bright under the fluorescent lights. The contractor who'd once built decks and laughter in backyards now looked like a man stripped of every nail, every excuse. Teresa followed chin high, eyes sharp as glass. She wore a tailored blazer like it was armor, but the cuffs at her wrists betrayed her. She didn't look humbled. She looked angry at being caught. Judge Morrison presided, her presence so commanding the entire room leaned forward with her words. The prosecutor began with the numbers. 19 properties in 3 years, $2 million in profit. Families displaced, lives broken. Then the victims spoke. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice cracked as she described the night they sold their dream home, their daughter sobbing into her pillow. Mr. Patel detailed medical bills left unpaid after fines drained their savings. The Johnsons spoke of separation papers signed under the pressure of mounting violations. Each story was a nail hammered into the coffin of Teresa's facade. And then Sandra took the stand. She swore the oath, settled into the witness chair, and transformed. Gone was the wife I'd lived beside for 12 years. In her place sat an investigator, calm, precise, unshakable. "Attorney Walker hired me," she began, "after families reported a pattern of harassment linked to forced home sales. My undercover work in Maple Ridge confirmed a coordinated scheme between Teresa Edwards and Michael Carter." The defense lawyer pounced. Isn't it true you deceived your own husband during this investigation? That you let him believe you were unfaithful? Sandra didn't flinch. I maintained cover to protect evidence integrity. My personal life was collateral damage, the lawyer smirked, thinking he'd struck. But the judge's face never changed. The jury didn't stir, because everyone in that room had heard the testimonies. Everyone knew the damage Teresa had caused. Sandra's lies might have hurt me, but Teresa's lies had destroyed families. When Teresa's turn came, she played her role flawlessly. Tears welled on cue. Her voice cracked like rehearsed glass. I only wanted safety. My husband died in a construction accident. Every violation I wrote was to prevent another tragedy. The courtroom shifted until the prosecutor produced the OSHA records, the insurance files, the missing obituary. No husband, no accident. Just a fabricated past to justify a present of theft. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. Guilty, fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. Michael's plea deal bought him 3 years in exchange for his testimony. A reduced sentence for a man who admitted everything when the walls finally closed in. Teresa wasn't so lucky. 5 years without parole, restitution ordered, a permanent ban from HOA leadership. When the bailiff cuffed her and led her away, she turned once, her mask gone. Her eyes locked on Sandra. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll regret crossing me." The clang of the holding door cut her threat short. The civil suits followed quickly. David Walker stood tall outside the courthouse, flanked by victims holding settlement checks. Restitution, damages, closure written in legal ink. The neighborhood, once divided by fines and fear, now found solidarity in survival. Reporters asked me the same question over and over. How do you feel about your wife's deception? Wife. The word burned. I never gave them the answer they wanted. No comment, I repeated, until the microphones grew tired, but inside, the answer was messier. I felt betrayed, furious, hollow. And yet, when I watched Sandra catalog evidence with ruthless efficiency, when I saw the relief in the eyes of victims who hugged her outside court, I also felt something else. Pride. The contradiction was unbearable. We didn't live together after the trial. She checked into the Marriott, called it space. I called it distance. At night, I stared at the empty side of the bed and wondered if love could survive lies, even if the lies were told in service of justice. Dr. Morrison, the counselor David recommended, thought it could. Trust isn't rebuilt by words, she said in her lavender-scented office. It's rebuilt by choices, by showing up again and again until doubt has no room left to sit. So we showed up, twice a week, role-played conversations, wrote unsent letters, learned the ways betrayal cuts from both sides. Sandra admitted guilt. She admitted she should have told me something, anything, that night the first violation notice arrived. I admitted fear, that the moment doubt entered, I let suspicion grow like mold until it coated everything. We weren't healed, but we were trying. Maple Ridge changed too. Mrs. Wilson was elected HOA president, her first act to dissolve secret committees and open the books. Annual meetings turned into community barbecues. Deck inspections were replaced with safety workshops. Neighbors who had once whispered accusations now shared potato salad and laughed about the great HOA takedown. The deck, the one that started everything, became a symbol. Not of fraud, not of fines, but of survival. 1 year later, on our anniversary, we hosted a barbecue on it. Sandra raised a glass, her voice steady but softer than I'd ever heard. "A year ago," she said, "this deck was bait. Today it's proof that we can build something stronger than lies. Not just Josh and me, but all of us." The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was real, raw, healing, but not everything tied up neatly. Teresa's parole petitions were denied, her letters from prison full of venom and threats. Michael wrote from his cell about starting a non-profit for HOA abuse victims, words that felt more like penance than redemption. And Sandra? She turned down case after case, retiring from undercover work. "Not worth losing us again," she told me, boxing up her surveillance gear. Instead, she consulted on HOA reform, testified before lawmakers, trained others on ethics. She channeled her guilt into change. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch her staring at that same old DOJ badge, thumb running over the edge. And I'd wonder, was she missing the rush, the secrecy, the fight? Or was she reminding herself of the cost? We never talked about it. Some wounds stay quiet. The real test came 18 months later, when a developer offered $2 million to buy our block for luxury condos. The neighborhood gathered, papers in hand, eyes wary. Sandra stood beside me as Mrs. Wilson raised the motion. All in favor of telling them where to stick it? Every hand went up. Laughter erupted, followed by cheers. We weren't victims anymore. We were a community. That night, Sandra and I sat on the deck, neighbors' laughter still echoing. She leaned her head on my shoulder, tentative, like she wasn't sure she was allowed anymore. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "if we'd have made it without all this?" I thought of the sleepless nights, the hidden cameras, the fake cops on Michael's porch, the courtroom battles. I thought of the broken trust and the slow, fragile rebuild. "No," I admitted, "but I know we wouldn't be who we are." She smiled, tired but real. "Then maybe it was worth it." I didn't answer. I just wrapped my arm around her, staring at the cedar boards beneath our feet, knowing they'd always carry the weight of more than just us. Months later, David Walker dropped by with a folder full of letters. Thank yous from families, photos of new homes, updates about scholarships, businesses, second chances. "You both should see this," he said, "because none of this would have happened without you." Sandra read each one with tears in her eyes. And for the first time, I realized the lies, the danger, the heartbreak. They had saved lives bigger than ours. Maybe that was worth something. Maybe it was worth everything. The sun dipped low over Maple Ridge, painting the sky the same golden hue it had the day this nightmare began. Sandra's phone buzzed with another case request. She silenced it without hesitation, slipped her hand into mine, and whispered, "Not worth it." For once, I believed her, because in the end, it wasn't about decks or fines or fraud. It was about survival, about community, about choosing each other even when it hurt. And as neighbors clinked glasses, as laughter spilled into the night, as the deck stood steady beneath us, I finally understood. Justice had been served. The neighborhood healed, and somehow against all odds, so had we.